Welcome to the Crime Scene Time Machine, episode 103, One Small Step, 52 Years Later. I'm your host, Scott Roeder, and I love you, planet Earth. I was born in 1970, just 1 year after we allegedly landed on the moon. For my entire life, I've lived in the shadow of that moment. It was supposed to be the greatest achievement of mankind. One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. That phrase echoed through my childhood, my schooling, my culture. It was presented not as a story, but as a fact, a cornerstone of our modern identity. But as I've grown older, I've begun to ask myself, was it truly a leap or just a legend? Because here we are, more than 50 years later, and the leap looks like more of a stumble. If man truly set foot on the moon, why did he never return? Why no colonies, no settlements, no expansion? History tells us mankind never stops at a frontier. We cross oceans, carve up continents, fly the skies, and conquer new ground. Yet with the moon, we just went once, and then we stopped. To me, that silence speaks louder than the famous words spoken on that July day. Some say it was politics, some say it was cost, but I believe it was something deeper. The moon landing, whether it happened or as told or whether it was staged, was less about the exploration and more about the narrative. Less about the dust and the rock and more about the minds of men. Because the moon has always been a symbol of illusion. It has no light of its own, yet it reflects the light of the sun. It waxes and wanes, ever shifting. To conquer the moon was to claim mastery over illusion itself. But maybe illusion conquered us. Whether men really walked there or cameras simply made it look so, the effect was the same. The world believed, and in believing, we learned a very dangerous lesson, that reality could be defined by broadcast, not by proof. The promise was a giant leap, but what I see is a regression. Since that day, humanity has stumbled backwards into greed, into materialism, into wars without end, into narcissism and depravity. The ego of man shouted triumph, but the soul of man faltered. So when I reflect on the moon landing, I see less a rocket and more of a mirror. The moon reflected what we wanted to believe, that we were gods, conquerors of heaven itself. But in truth, it revealed how easily we could be swayed, impressed, manipulated, and controlled. And now in modern times, we look to Elon Musk and SpaceX, reusable rockets, bold talk of Mars, a new age of exploration. But here is the irony. They are not focused on the moon, our closest neighbor, the very place we supposedly proved we could conquer. They bypass it entirely and aim for Mars, a far greater, perhaps unattainable frontier. All the while, their rockets, their launches, with the branding, their language seeped in symbolism, esoteric, almost occult. Actually, in fact, occult in nature, filled with imagery that feels more like an Illuminati ritual than a scientific pursuit. The spectacle continues, the illusion deepens. If we could not go to the moon, or if the moon itself was the greatest stage ever built, how do we expect to colonize Mars? Perhaps it isn't about going at all. Perhaps it is, once again, about impressing mankind, controlling the narrative, and shaping belief. The moon was supposed to be a leap. Instead, it may have been the first great broadcast illusion. And today, as rockets rise and the world looks to Mars, we must ask, are we moving closer to the stars or only deeper into the shadows? Because in the end, the truth, not spectacle, not ego, is the only force that can carry mankind beyond this earth. Truth is the real leap. Truth is the light. Now let's pull the curtain back just a little bit further. Because when you really examine the story of 1969, you begin to see not only rockets and astronauts, but rituals, symbols, and the sleight of hand. Look at NASA's own symbolism, the serpent tongue in the NASA logo, the Apollo mission patch with its Greek god association, the constant references to gods and myths. I mean, look at CERN in Europe, built with a statue of Shiva, the Hindu god of destruction, dancing outside of its headquarters. Look at SpaceX naming rockets Falcon, Dragon, and Starship like something out of a medieval grimoire. These are not just engineering projects. They are dressed in ritualistic robes, cloaked in language that speaks not only to science, but to the subconscious. Then think about the excuses, okay? NASA has openly admitted we destroyed the technology that got us to the moon, and it's a painful process to build it back. Can you imagine Henry Ford saying, we built the Model T Ford, but, well, we destroyed the blueprints, so we can't make cars anymore? It's absurd. And think, yet, this is the explanation we are told to accept as the gospel. And let's talk about the Van Allen radiation belts. These invisible shields of deadly radiation encircle the Earth. The Apollo craft, thinner than a soda can in places, supposedly pierced through it twice without any harm to the human occupants. Yet today, NASA's engineers admit on camera they are still working on the technology to protect astronauts from this deadly invisible radiation. By their own words, we can't do what we supposedly did with less computing power than the phone in your pocket. Now, here's the irony. In 1969, they never imagined that one day every person on the planet would have access to information, to archives, to cross-analysis. They thought the broadcast would be eternally uncontested. But in the age of the internet, the people have become their own research institutions, and thank God for that. And when people begin to ask questions, suddenly the evidence is gone, burned, destroyed, misplaced. Here's the thing. In law, if you destroy the evidence that proves your claim and you cannot reproduce it, you stand on very shaky ground. We call that spoliation of evidence. It creates the inference that the truth was never there to be gotten with. Okay? And by that principle alone, the moon landing stands on legal peril. So when we call the conspiracy theorists asking for questions, remember the real conspiracy may not be in doubting, but in blindly believing. Now, I don't say this to depress you. I say it to liberate you, folks. Because once you realize that much of what we're shown is illusion, it frees you to look higher for real light. If the moon's landing was the man's greatest magic trick, then maybe the greater truth is this. Mankind doesn't need a flag on the lunar dust to be significant. What we need, honestly, is humility. You know what? At the end of the day, I'd rather not argue about rockets and radiation belts. I'd rather be honest with you. Whether we went to the moon or not, the bigger question is where we're going now. Because real ascension isn't with your hair on fire, chasing every headline or theory. It's with your soul on fire, speaking truth, seeking light, rising above the noise. That's the step that matters. So if the moon landing was a giant leap, maybe the next one is quieter. Maybe it's each of us finding a way to ascend, not with ego, but with spirit. This is Crime Scene Time Machine, episode 103. Thanks for traveling with me. Until next time, keep your eyes on the evidence and your soul pointed toward the light. I've been Scott Roeder, and I love you. See you next time. Bye.